And the way this hushing up process works is that if you take, for example, the big terrestrial broadcasters in the United States, ABC, NBC, and CBS, those corporations, they issued shares on the international stock market system, and General Electric, who actually built the 40-year-old reactor plant at Fukushima, there is a very big relationship. I'm talking about an economic, financial, stocks and shares relationship between these corporations such as General Electric and the big broadcasters. And the nuclear industry is a bottomless pit where people have got their noses in the trough. These luxury yachts that you see in places like Monaco are owned by, some of those yachts are owned by people in the nuclear industry. And billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of people's tax money is being shoveled into this industry because they've got these subsidies which are not really being used primarily for the running of the plants. They're being run through bribery and through corruption and through a process that hushes people from speaking the truth about these leaks and about these dangers. And Greenpeace, the Green Party, the worldwide ecological movement need these things. They need to get this message out to the people because people do not understand that almost a year doesn't go by when there isn't some kind of contamination leak.
Well, the sheer nature of the stuff, there is nothing safe about nuclear energy. As you were explaining before, you simply refine this stuff and pile it into a corner and it melts and it heats and heats and heats and never stops and just keeps melting and keeps. What is possibly safe about this? Well, this is and like you said, it's just simply an exotic way of boiling water. That's all they're doing. This is complete insanity. There is nothing safe about nuclear energy. There never has been. It's the most ridiculous thing we ever came up with.
Yeah. Well, what I'd like to recommend to people is that if you've listened to this broadcast and you want to contribute to make a change, first of all, I can guarantee there's going to be scam charities profiting from this disaster, the same as what happened with the recent earthquake disaster in Haiti. Be very careful about giving your money to these relief funds and these disaster funds. If the Japanese government, which is one of the richest countries in the world, stop squandering their assets on the stock market, they have enough money to actually at least buy food and get temporary shelter for the Japanese people. It's much better that you now write a letter or write 2 letters. This is what I'm going to do tomorrow, is what I recommend everybody to do. Write 2 letters. One letter should be sent to your governmental representative, whether you decide that's going to be your member of parliament, your congressman, your senator, your governor, whatever. What you should do is you should send a letter explaining that you are extremely annoyed about the constant leaks and contamination of nuclear facilities, and that you do not agree with that the risk is worth taking, and therefore you would like your government representative to send a letter on your behalf to the electricity supply utility company that supplies your house with electricity and request that the electricity that they supply you is not nuclear generated. Now, that probably won't actually, have a real world change, but it will show these politicians that people are really concerned about it. The second letter, this is really what I recommend people do, is you must send a letter to the broadcasters which you most often watch. If you most often watch the BBC, send your letter to the BBC. Make these letters an open letter. If you run a blog page, if you run a website, publish your letter and complain that you have had you haven't been serviced properly by these broadcasters. Explain that you're annoyed by the unscientific way that this has been dealt with, and let those broadcasters understand that they've got to stop oversimplifying these reactor leaks and reactor disasters. Make these broadcasters realize that the public are very concerned about the quality of the information which is being broadcast. I'm not sure whether that will make any difference, but, people power, these letters, sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes by one person sending a letter to, say, for example, the House of Lords, you will find a Lord or a Member of Parliament, or sometimes even a senator or a congressperson who does agree. And now and again, you do find the odd governmental representative who will say, yes, that's a great letter. It's simple. I understand that. That's an issue which we can all relate to, and it's not a political football. I understand what this member of my constituency is telling me. And so that's what I say to people. You must make a stand, make your feelings known, because otherwise this conspiracy of silence about the ongoing contamination, which is poisoning our seas, poisoning our lands, and poisoning the sky, will continue.
I completely agree. Let's bring up Bob Tuskin from the Intel Hub here for a few minutes. TheIntelHub.com, his website. They just got done with the broadcast over on Oracle. And Bob, thank you very much for joining us. Do you want to give us kind of in a nutshell what was spoken about on the Intel Hub today? I know that you were able to speak with Tim from the radiation website. We were having a little trouble getting through to him to bring him up on our broadcast. So maybe
that's where we.
Yeah, what's going on over there?
Well, Tim's got an interesting network set up where he's having independent researchers with Geiger counters send in their data as far as the radiation levels. And we asked him some tough questions. Is this trusted? Obviously, we can't trust Obama and the mainstream media when it comes to accurate levels. And we just had a wonderful caller, actually, in the last segment from Chernobyl, actually, who moved here. And he spoke of how in Chernobyl, just like Chris Everard and your guests have been talking about tonight, the people were not told the accurate levels. And the same thing very well is happening in Japan. And here we had live reports from Japan throughout the week. The reports we've had are pretty minuscule as far as people panicking. Everything seems to be somewhat normal, according to some of our sources, but then we hear high level elevations of radiation and all sorts of other things from other sources. So it's hard to know what really is going on. So we decided to buy our own radiation device, radiation monitoring device, and we'll be updating in live time on our website what the West Coast is experiencing, and we'll let our listeners know so that they can have an unbiased look at this. But the first thing that comes to my mind, and I'm going to be brief because I got to get back to some research I'm doing for tomorrow's show. And by the way, Chris, I meant to get back to you sooner today. If there's anything else that you want to finish up or have any breaking news with this, Chris, you're welcome to come on our program tomorrow night and give us any updates that you have.
Absolutely,
so
I will.
I want to extend that invitation to you. We meant to get in touch with you, and I'm glad that Chris and Shree could facilitate this emergency broadcast tonight, along with Max and a lot of great people. And really, I think one of the things that stuck out to me, and we're talking about this in the chat right now, so a lot of our listeners are going to know what I'm getting at here, the symbolism behind the 11th. I can't help but to think of that. And I was aware before this all that the nuclear weapons dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki took place on the 33rd parallel. And this, in addition to that, took place on the 33rd parallel. Now, what does the number 33 represent? Well, that's something that we probably don't have time to get into, and a lot of our listeners already understand what it represents. In addition to that, the number 11th is very symbolic, and I don't know if I'm playing into this too much, but 311, well, what are 311s? That's 33. Also, the Madrid bombing happened on 3/11. A bunch of different stuff. So I can't help but to believe that there's something more to this than what we're being told. Regardless if this was created by HARP or Scalar Technologies or whatever, we know that they've done this sort of stuff in the past. And is this a part of a big picture? I think more likely than not, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Very well said. Max, do you want to touch upon the numerology or esoteric connections behind any of this?
Well, it's interesting. The dates are always interesting. They do love their numbers. They do love doing things on the 33rd parallel. I hadn't actually thought about the numerology with this event, actually. I hadn't really looked at it. I've been still trying to figure out whether it was natural or whether HARP was involved. I mean, I don't know. I tend to think it was natural just because of its location. But, I mean, I'm always up for more research, so I don't know. I hadn't really thought about the numerology until now, to be honest.
And I don't know that the numerology necessarily says that this wasn't natural. You know, it could very well be natural, and I don't know. It's hard to say these days. It's just it comes to a point where these symbolisms, when they keep popping up again and again and again, you just have to wonder sometimes. You know, is there more to this?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you can't. There's not a real lot to be said for coincidence, really. I don't see a lot of coincidence in anything anymore.
Well, let me ask you this, Bob. On your broadcast, the Intel Hub, you've been also getting mixed reports from the callers, from the guests, that the radiation levels are high, that there's no radiation levels, et cetera, et cetera. Is that correct? And what is your analysis of the situation?
Well, we don't know who to trust. We're getting some people, telling us that the levels are, this, and then other people calling up telling us that everything's all right, including the live reports we've had from Japan. I tell you one thing, whatever the government tells us, I'm definitely not going to go to sleep and say, oh, okay, the government told me it's this, therefore there's nothing to worry about. In fact, whatever they're telling us, I'm more likely to believe that the opposite of it is true in many regards. There's all sorts of open-ended statements we heard from Obama earlier saying, the elevation, will not affect California in the West Coast. But he didn't say until when or as of when. He, as most politicians do, made these open-ended statements in which the subtext is the real message, and what they're not saying, of course, is that people should not panic. He went on the air saying people should not buy iodine or sea kelp or whatever to protect themselves, and I just fundamentally disagree with that. I think that regardless of whether or not this is fear or hype that we're all going to have to deal with radiation fallout, I think it's essential we get prepared. I think to stock up on iodine and kelp, I got some super kelp, and these sorts of things can only help. And if this isn't the event that it helps against, well, I can guarantee you that we may experience a false flag dirty bomb or something of that sort in the future, and something else to throw us off. So it's essential that we stock up. Otherwise, we see a run on this stuff in times like this, in which public perception and fear is at a height, in which people are going to the stores and they're trying to hoard on this stuff now. If we think that people are not going to go crazy when our food supply and our water supply and our energy is shut down and we can't get gasoline like what's going on in Japan,